The African sun is a brutal master. It bakes the cracked earth until it feels less like soil and more like pottery. This is where our story begins, on a dusty, rarely used track that skirts the edge of a massive private game reserve. The time was late afternoon, the heat still heavy, but the light was starting to turn that deep golden color that only the savannah knows. Elias was a boy, maybe 15 years old, but with the quiet seriousness of someone much older. He walked this road almost every day, coming back from the nearest village where he helped his uncle sell handcrafted wooden carvings. Elias wasn't thinking about anything dramatic. He was thinking about the relief of the evening breeze and the simple dinner of maize and stew that awaited him. The rhythmic crunch of his worn boots in the red dust was the only sound for miles. He was focused on the path when he saw it. At first, it looked like a bundle of rags or maybe a sun-scorched log thrown carelessly onto the gravel strip. It was small, motionless, and oddly positioned right in the center of the track. Elias slowed his pace, curiosity turning into a prickle of unease. He was accustomed to the sights and sounds of this land of things should be that still. As he got closer, his breath hitched. It was a creature, and it was barely clinging to life. It was a lion cub. Not a large, powerful young lion, but a baby, perhaps only a few weeks old, maybe 2 months at most. It was lying fully collapsed, flat on its side, the dust sticking to its soft, spotted coat, and its breathing was shallow, uneven, almost silent. Elias stopped dead. The fear was instant, and sharp a lion, even a baby, could mean a protective mother nearby. His eyes darted nervously to the tall, dry grasses that lined the road, scanning for the telltale twitch of a tail or the low, rumbling growl that signaled a nearby predator. He waited, motionless, heart hammering against his ribs, listening for any danger. The only sound was the buzzing of the afternoon insects. Nothing. Silence. The cub was alone. But the cub wasn't just alone. It was dying. Its head was drooped, its eyes closed, and its tiny body was pitifully thin. It looked exhausted, starved, and terribly dehydrated. The blistering heat radiating off the road surface was a death sentence in slow motion. For Elias, the immediate fear of the mother was quickly replaced by a wave of pure, simple concern for the small, helpless life in front of him. He knew that if he left it, the cub would not survive the night. Vultures, hyenas, or simply the relentless sun would claim it. Long before dawn, Elias took a tentative step forward, then another. He approached with slow, deliberate movements, talking softly in his native tongue, a calming, rhythmic sound that he hoped the animal would register as non-threatening. When he reached the cub, he knelt down slowly. He could feel the desperate, faint heat rising from its fur. He reached out a trembling hand and gently touched the cub's flank. It didn't react. It didn't flinch. It was too weak. He had to move it. Now, but a lion cub is not a kitten. Even in this state, its instincts could flare up. Gathering all his courage, Elias slipped his arms carefully underneath the small, limp body, supporting its head. The cub was surprisingly light, feather-light, a tragic indication of its starvation. He lifted it gently, cradling it against his chest. As he did, the cub let out the faintest, most heartbreaking whimper, sound like dry grass rubbing together. Elias quickly retreated from the dangerous open road, heading for the shelter of a small cluster of acacia trees about 50 yards away. The shade there was deep and cool, a vital respite from the sun, merciless glare. He laid the cub down on the relatively cool dirt beneath the thorn-covered branches. His mind was racing, but his movements were practical, honed by a life lived close to the earth. What did a dying, dehydrated creature need most? Water! He still had half a canteen of water left. It was lukewarm, but it was life. Elias carefully unscrewed the cap. He didn't dare pour it. That could choke the cub. Instead, he dipped 2 fingers into the water and carefully, painstakingly, wet the cub's dry lips and gums. He repeated the action again and again, wetting, waiting, wetting. He watched the cub's throat. After maybe the 5th attempt, he saw a slight, almost imperceptible swallowing motion. Hope, small and fragile, sparked inside him. He continued this slow, tedious process for the next half hour, giving the cub only drops at a time, ensuring that the small body could absorb the liquid without shock. Slowly, miraculously, the cub began to show the smallest signs of responsiveness. Its nose twitched. Its head lifted slightly, just an inch or 2, and its eyes fluttered open. The cub's eyes were a pale, hazy, yellow-blue, typical of a young lion, but they held a look of profound confusion and exhaustion. It looked up at Elias, not with aggression, but with a deep, wary helplessness. For a brief, powerful moment, their eyes locked. In that silent exchange, a connection was made, a plea offered and accepted. This was no longer just a wild animal. It was a life that Elias had saved from the edge. Elias knew the enormity of what he had done. He had rescued a lion cub. This was strictly illegal and profoundly dangerous. A lion cub needs its mother. Where was the pride? They could be searching. He thought about taking the cub to the nearest game warden post, but that was miles away, and he knew the cub wouldn't survive the journey without immediate, sustained care. The cub needed to be fed. He looked down at the vulnerable animal resting beside him. It was a miracle that it had survived this long. He needed to find a safe place for it, a secret place where he could continue to help it recover just for a little while, just until it was strong enough. Now, pause for a moment in this gripping story. If you're captivated by the connection between this boy and this tiny, helpless predator, please consider joining our community. We share incredible, untold stories like this all the time. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It truly helps us bring more emotional animal stories to life. Don't miss the rest of Elias and the cub's astonishing journey. Elias decided to keep the cub secret. He couldn't risk telling his uncle, who would immediately do the sensible. Ligo sing and call the autoratisa. Move Elias fared would doom the cub, which seemed too weak to withstand bureaucratic procedures and transportation. He needed milk something easily digestible. He had a small clay pot back at his family SE remote home meant for carrying vegetables. It would have to serve as a carrier. He gently placed the cub inside the pot, patting the bottom with soft, dry grass. The cub was quiet, too weak even to resist the cramped space. He lifted the heavy pot and began his trek back home, cutting through the tall, shadowed brush instead of following the open road, hoping to avoid any other eyes. Every few minutes, he would set the pot down and check on the cub, offering another wet fingertip of water. The journey seemed endless. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. The air cooled, and a new wave of fear gripped Elias. The night predators. He walked faster, the pot heavy in his arms, the cub's fragile life depending entirely on his strength and secrecy. He arrived at his family's small hut just as the last light vanished. His uncle, Jonah, was already asleep, his low, rhythmic snores a familiar comfort. Elias moved with the silent skill of a bush child, he crept into the small shed where they stored firewood and tools. This small, dark space, unused, unsheltered, would be the cub's refuge. He placed the cub gently onto a bed of soft, old sackcloth he found discarded in the corner. He knew he needed food, and milk was the best option. He had saved a small amount of money from his carvings. Under the cover of darkness, Elias slipped out of the hut and ran towards the nearest small trading post, miles away, moving with a speed that belied his weariness. He returned nearly 2 hours later, exhausted, carrying a small, precious tin of powdered milk. Powdered milk he had purchased back in the shed, with only the faint glow of a kerosene lamp for light. Elias began the most crucial part of the rescue. He mixed a very weak solution of the powdered milk with clean, cool water. He didn't have a bottle, so he used a flat, wide saucer, dipping his fingers in the milk and letting the cub lick it off, just as he had done with the water. The cub licked tentatively, then with more urgency. It was hungry. The small, spotted body trembled slightly as it drank. Elias felt a profound relief wash over him. This was the first true sign of life, of a fighting spirit. He continued until the cub seemed satisfied. A small, wet smear of milk around its tiny mouth. Then the cub curled up on the sackcloth, gave a soft sigh that seemed to melt away all its tension, and fell into a deep, heavy sleep. Elias sat on the dirt floor beside the sleeping lion cub, watching over it. The gravity of the situation was settling in. He had a wild animal, a growing predator, hidden only a few yards from his sleeping uncle. This was a commitment of the most terrifying kind, one that would change his life forever. He knew the risks. He knew the dangers. But as he looked at the small, perfect form of the sleeping lion cub, he also knew he could not have chosen any other path. He named the cub Keto, which means jewel in a local dialect, for the incredible preciousness of this fragile life. The long night had begun. He would spend it keeping watch, ready for whatever the dawn would bring. The decision was made. Keto was under his protection, but Elias knew his challenges had only just begun. Keeping a wild secret, nurturing a young lion, and facing the inevitable day when Keto would no longer be a baby would require more courage than he currently possessed. He watched the gentle rise and fall of Keto's chest, a tiny heart beating strongly against the vast African darkness. This small, exhausted jewel was now his burden, his secret, and his incredible hope. The first few hours of the night were quiet, interrupted only by the rustling of rodents outside the shed. Elias, despite his exhaustion, remained awake, alert to every sound. He gently stroked Keto's fur, and to his surprise, the cub leaned into the contact, a faint, soothing purr vibrating in its chest. This was not the sound of a predator. It was the sound of a desperate baby finding comfort. Elias felt a deep, instinctive bond solidifying between them. He thought about the pride Keto had lost. The mother must have been driven away, or perhaps died defending the territory. Keto was the casualty of a brutal, unforgiving world. Elias was now its only shield. He promised the sleeping cub that he would not fail him. The commitment was monumental. He would need a constant supply of milk and eventually meat. He would need to keep Keto hidden from his uncle and from the prying eyes of the neighbors and, most importantly, the game reserve authorities. The consequences of discovery were severe. A heavy fine, maybe worse, and Keto would certainly be taken away. But every time Keto whimpered in his sleep, Elias felt the resolve deepen. This was his responsibility now. He carefully wrapped an old scarf around the cub for warmth as the savannah night grew cold. He thought of the weeks ahead, the immense task of raising this wild creature in secret, and the heart-wrenching moment when he would eventually have to say goodbye. That day was far off, but it loomed over him like a distant storm cloud. For now, he just needed Keto to wake up healthy. The morning arrived not with a gentle dawn, but with the sharp cry of a guinea fowl and the quickening heat of the sun. Elias, stiff and exhausted, woke up in the shed next to Keto. The cub was stirring. He stretched his tiny paws, revealing claws that were still soft and blunt, but were undeniably the tools of a predator. He looked up at Elias and let out a small, demanding meow sound utterly disproportionate to the king of the beasts he was destined to be. This wasn't the weak, dying creature Elias had found. Keto was still frail, but the water and milk had done their work. Elias felt a burst of powerful, dizzying relief. Keto was going to live. The next few weeks fell into a pattern of secrecy, exhaustion, and intense growing affection. Elias created a routine of almost impossible complexity. Every morning before dawn, he would check on Keto, offering him a fresh portion of weak milk. He had hidden the powdered milk tin high up in the thatched roof of the shed, where Jonah never looked. During the day, while Elias was away helping his uncle sell carvings, Keto would stay hidden in the shed, sleeping most of the time. Elias knew this was only a temporary solution. A lion cub, even a small one, produces smells and sounds that are hard to mask. The local village dogs, always sniffing around for scraps, became a constant source of anxiety. Elias learned to scatter strong-smelling spices and dried herbs around the shed's perimeter, a trick he remembered his grandmother using to keep snakes away, hoping it would mask the scent of the cat. As Keto gained strength, he became playful. His favorite game was pouncing on Elias's feet or tearing apart the old sackcloth with toothless but determined bites. These were the instinctive behaviors of a wild animal translated into the clumsy movements of a baby. When Keto heard a deep, resonating rumble that started in his chest and vibrated through Elias's whole body, it felt like the most incredible secret in the world. Elias would spend hours sitting with him, talking to him, stroking the velvety soft ears and the surprisingly large paws. But Keto was also growing, and alarmingly fast. In just a few short weeks, the once feather-light cub became heavy, solid muscle. He needed much more than weak powdered milk. The transition to meat was becoming urgent. This new need created a terrifying new problem for Elias. Meat was a luxury. Buying it would be impossible without Jonah asking questions, and stealing it was unthinkable. Elias had to rely on his knowledge of the bush. He started setting small snares for rodents and birds far from the house. When he caught something, he would carefully prepare it, often hiding the scraps of fur or feathers far away, burying them deep in the dirt. He had to be careful to make Keto's transition to solid food gradual, grinding the meat with stones to make it palatable for the young cub. One day, the risk became painfully real. Elias was late coming home. He had spent extra time preparing a slightly larger piece of meat for Keto. As he approached the hut, he saw Jonah near the shed. Jonah wasn't just near it, he was looking intently at the ground right outside the door. Jonah was an old man, practical and stern, but not unkind. He had the eyes of a hawk, and he noticed everything. Elias's blood ran cold. He froze, dropping his bag of carvings. Jonah straightened up, turning his steady gaze toward Elias. "Elias, you are late," Jonah said, his voice flat. "And What is that smell?" Elias swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Uncle, I was fixing a trap for a hyena that has been bothering the chickens. I used some old bad meat to lure it away. The smell is strong, I think." Jonah looked at the shed door, then back at Elias. "A hyena? We have no chickens, Elias." "We haven't had chickens in a year." The lie had failed. Elias's heart pounded. He knew he was trapped. He waited, bracing himself for the anger, the shouting, the questions about the illegal wildlife. But Jonah simply sighed, a sound heavy with the weariness of the heat and age. "The sun has made you foolish, boy. Go wash up. Your supper is getting cold." Jonah walked away, but not before Elias noticed a faint trace of worry in his uncle's eyes. Jonah had seen something. He hadn't pressed it, but the secret was out in the open air. Trembling on the edge of discovery, Elias rushed into the shed, hugging the cub tightly, whispering promises to be more careful. The near miss was a brutal reminder that time was running out. Keto was no longer a small, fragile jewel. He was 5 months old now, a gangly, powerful creature whose spots were fading and whose small, pointed claws were becoming dangerously sharp. He needed more space, more activity, and most pressingly, other lions. Elias could not simulate the complex social training Keto needed, nor could he provide the massive amount of food a juvenile lion requires. The weight of the secret, the exhausting routine, and the constant fear were crushing Elias. His exhaustion made him careless. One afternoon, while Jonah was taking his mandatory Keto, in a fit of playful energy, managed to squeeze his head under the loosely secured door of the shed. He let out a playful but unmistakable roar, a sound that, though still small, contained the raw power of the future king. The sound was sharp enough to cut through the quiet afternoon air. It was a clear, undeniable sound. It was the sound of a lion. Jonah bolted out of the hut, his face a mixture of fear and pure, immediate understanding. He didn't look at Elias. He looked straight at the shed. Elias stood paralyzed, the moment of truth arriving not as a quiet conversation, but as a juvenile lion's playful declaration. Jonah marched toward the shed, his shoulders tense. Elias finally found his voice. "Uncle, wait. It's not what you think." Jonah didn't stop. He threw open the shed door, and there was Keto. The cub stopped playing instantly, surprised by the loud noise and the sight of a new, unfamiliar man. He retreated slightly, tucking his body behind Elias's legs, the only person he knew as protection. Jonah stood in the doorway, framed by the afternoon sun, staring at the growing lion cub. His eyes traveled from Keto's powerful young body to Elias's desperately protective stance. The silence stretched thicker and heavier than the African heat. "A lion," Jonah whispered, not in accusation, but in stunned disbelief. "You have a lion in my shed, Elias?" "A wild animal." Elias rushed to explain the story, the collapse on the road, the dehydration, the inevitable death if he hadn't intervened. He spoke of Keto's spurs and his gentle play, minimizing the true danger and emphasizing the bond. He poured out his fear, his hope, and his overwhelming responsibility. Jonah listened, his face remaining unreadable, a mask of deep thought. When Elias finished, Jonah simply reached out a hand, not toward the cub, but toward Elias's shoulder. He squeezed it gently. "You saved a life, my son," Jonah said, using the affectionate term he reserved for rare, important moments. "That is a good thing." But this good thing is now a huge problem. You can't keep him. He's no longer a baby. Jonah stepped fully into the shed and knelt down, a few feet away from Keto. He studied the cub carefully. He was a man of the bush, and he recognized the look of a well-cared for, but deeply wild, animal. Keto watched him, his ears flicking, calculating the threat. Now, pause again. The bond between Elias and Keto is about to face its greatest test, the reality of the wild. If you are moved by this incredible, forbidden friendship and want to see how this dramatic story concludes, make sure you are part of our journey. Take a second to subscribe and hit the like button so we can keep sharing these breathtaking emotional rescue stories from the heart of the savannah. Jonah spent the next hour with Elias and Keto. He didn't play with the cub, but he observed him the way. Keto moved, the strength in his pounce, the sharpness of his focus. Jonah confirmed Elias's fears. Keto was too old to be a secret pet, but still too young to survive alone. He is becoming dangerous, Elias, not because he is bad, but because he is a lion, Jonah explained, his voice gentle but firm. The moment he tastes the blood of a large animal, his true instinct will surface, and that day is very close. They agreed they had to act immediately. They couldn't simply release Keto near the village. He was too habituated to humans and would surely raid livestock, which would lead to him being shot. They needed a plan, a proper professional rescue plan. The solution came from Jonah's quiet, long-held wisdom. He knew an old man named Samuel, a veteran animal tracker who worked on the far side of the huge game reserve. Samuel had a reputation for rehabilitating orphaned and injured predators, often working unofficially to reintroduce them far away from human contact. It was a risk telling Samuel would mean admitting the illegal possession, but it was Keto's only chance. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Elias and Jonah began preparing for the long, secret journey. Jonah secured a sturdy wooden crate, the kind used for carrying large harvested gourds, and reinforced it with thick ropes. Keto was not happy about the crate. He protested with loud, throaty snarls that echoed the sounds of a full-grown lion, a clear sign of his maturity. It took all of Elias's calming efforts and Jonah's brute strength to finally secure the young lion inside. Elias had been focused on Keto's survival. Now, he was consumed by the pain of impending separation. He knelt by the crate, tears streaming down his face as Keto pawed desperately at the wooden bars, his yellow-blue eyes fixed on Elias. "I have to let you go, Keto," Elias whispered, his voice cracking. "I saved your life, but I cannot give you your future. Only the savannah can do that." The crate was loaded onto the back of Jonah's battered old pickup truck, covered carefully with a tarpaulin to hide their illicit cargo. The truck's engine roared to life, a rough sound that announced the start of their desperate mission. Elias sat in the back with Keto, his hand resting on the heavy crate, absorbing the vibrations of the young lion's distress. The journey to Samuel's remote outpost would take an entire day, cutting deep into the wild, unpredictable heart of the reserve. They drove away from home, away from the safety of their secret, heading into the vast, unforgiving landscape. They passed through the reserve gates just as the game wardens started their patrols. Jonah had fashioned a story about delivering farming equipment to a distant site. His calm demeanor and Elias's silence kept them from being stopped, but every mile was a torment. Keto was growing agitated, pacing restlessly inside the crate, letting out short, frustrated roars that shook the metal frame of the truck. Elias knew this was the hardest thing he would ever have to do. He looked back at the small world. He was leaving the dust, the familiar trees, the distant, shimmering heat haze over his village. Ahead lay the true wilderness and the unknown destiny of the cub he now loved like family. They were driving towards Quito's freedom, but away from Elias's heart. The road stretched out before them, an endless ribbon of red dust, leading them toward the ultimate sacrifice. Elias focused on the distant horizon, praying that Samuel would agree to help and that this long, dangerous road would lead to Quito's salvation. The journey was long and agonizing. The old truck rattled and groaned over the rough paths, kicking up clouds of red dust that hung in the air like a veil. Elias sat with his ear pressed against the wooden crate, listening to Quito's distressed whimpers and frustrated scrapes. The sounds were heartbreaking. He kept repeating the cub's name, a soft, constant mantra, trying to project calm through the thick wood. By mid-afternoon, they reached the deepest part of the reserve, a remote sector guarded by dense acacia thickets and massive baobab trees. The air felt heavier here, the silence more profound, broken only by the occasional distant cry of a raptor. Finally, they arrived at Samuel's outpost, a small, carefully camouflaged compound made of rough-cut timber surrounded by a high, sturdy fence. Samuel was waiting. He was an imposing man, his skin weathered by decades in the bush, his eyes ancient and keenly intelligent. He greeted Jonah with a curt nod and immediately focused his attention on the covered crate. Elias and Jonah quickly explained the situation: the collapsed cub on the road, the impossible choice, the weeks of secret care, and the urgent need for professional rehabilitation. Elias spoke with a raw passion that couldn't be ignored, conveying the depth of his bond with Quito. Samuel listened silently, his expression serious. When Elias finished, Samuel walked over to the crate and slowly, deliberately pulled back the tarpaulin. Quito, sensing the new presence, let out a throaty snarl, a sound of pure, instinctive menace. Samuel didn't flinch. He simply peered through the bars at the young lion. "He is well fed," Samuel observed, his voice a low rumble, "but he carries the scent of human hands. Too much contact. He will be difficult to teach the wild ways." Again Samuel paused, looking directly at Elias. "You saved his life, boy. That is a great thing. Now, we must do the hardest part. Give him back his future. His life will be in the wild, not in a shed. You must understand that any further contact will only harm him." The words were a brutal acknowledgement of the truth Elias already knew. They carefully helped Samuel and his small team unload the crate. They carried Quito into a large, secure enclosure designed to minimize human interaction, while maximizing the cub's exposure to the sights, sounds, and smells of the wilderness. As the team prepared to release Quito into the enclosure, Elias was given one last moment. Samuel, seeing the boy's anguish, allowed him to approach the crate before the door was opened. Elias knelt down, his face close to the bars. He reached a finger through, and Quito, sensing his friend, stopped his agitated pacing. He rubbed his large, powerful head against Elias's finger, purring one last, deep, sorrowful rumble. "Goodbye, my jewel," Elias whispered, his vision blurring with tears. "Go and be the king you were meant to be." Samuel gave the signal. The crate door was hoisted open. Quito hesitated for a moment, then bolted out, sniffing the strange, exciting, open air. He raced toward the far side of the enclosure, disappearing into the tall grasses, a flash of tawny gold blending instantly with the savanna. He didn't look back. The drive home was silent, heavy with loss. Elias felt an emptiness where Quito's precious, secret presence used to be. He had done the right thing, the necessary thing, but the pain was immense. Months passed. Elias returned to his routine, selling carvings, walking the dusty road, but everything was different. The silence of the shed was a constant reminder of the life he had saved and lost. He often thought of Quito, wondering if he remembered him, wondering if he was truly surviving in the brutal reserve. Then, 6 months after the heartbreaking farewell, the shocking moment arrived. Elias was back on the familiar dirt road, walking home late one afternoon. The sun was low, and the shadows were long and purple. He was deep in thought when he heard a sound, a low, powerful, resonant roar. It was much closer than any lion roar should be. This was not the playful cry of a cub. This was the voice of a magnificent, full-grown animal. Elias froze, his instincts screaming at him to find cover. He scanned the dense bushline, his heart pounding in familiar, primal fear. He saw movement. A huge male lion stepped silently out of the tall grass less than 20 yards away. It was magnificent. Its coat was golden, its musculature powerful, and it possessed a developing dark mane that framed a massive head. This was a beast of true power, capable of crushing bone and dominating the territory. Elias knew he was in mortal danger. He slowly, carefully began to back away, trying not to break eye contact, knowing that any sudden movement could trigger an attack. The lion watched him. It didn't charge. It didn't crouch to hunt. Instead, it took a slow, deliberate step forward, its tail giving one low, steady flick. Then, the lion did something that defied all reason, all known rules of the wild. The giant predator lowered its massive head slightly and let out a soft, deep rumbala sound that vibrated with immense power, but was utterly devoid of threat. It was the sound of recognition. Elias stopped breathing. He stared at the lion's face, at the familiar, bright golden eyes, and then at a very specific, tiny scar on the animal's right ear, small, ragged tear that Elias knew came from Quito's playful tussle with a thorny acacia branch weeks before the cub left. It was Quito, this powerful, magnificent creature, now fully wild and strong, was the tiny, collapsed baby he had saved from the searing heat of the road. Elias felt a surge of emotion so powerful it brought him to his knees. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He stayed right where he was, overwhelmed. The lion, Quito, watched him for a long moment, the deep rumble continuing in his chest. It was a wordless communication, a powerful acknowledgement of the bond forged in desperation and milk. Quito stayed there, silent, his presence dominating the entire savanna, allowing Elias to simply be near him, safe for a few incredible, eternal seconds. Then, with the same silent grace with which he had appeared, Quito turned. He gave a final, regal sweep of his tail and melted back into the shadows of the tall grass. He left no trace, only the profound, vibrating silence of his passing. Elias eventually managed to stand up, his legs shaking. He didn't tell Jonah. He didn't tell anyone. This was their new secret, a bond between the boy and the king, a silent promise kept by the mighty lion. Elias continued his walk home, but he was no longer just a boy selling carvings. He was the keeper of a profound truth, that sometimes the greatest act of love is the painful choice to let go, and that the most shocking rewards come when the wild world remembers the kindness shown to a fragile life. He looked toward the reserve where his friend, the king, now reigned, and he smiled. The knowledge of Quito's strength Keto's freedom, and Keto's astonishing recognition was more than enough. It was everything.